Who's my beautiful white dog? Who's my beautiful white dog? You know you're a good girl. You know. Yes, you do. Hey guys, thanks for joining me. It's Nicole from Grey Rose Games. In today's episode, we are going to discuss 10 tips regarding choosing the perfect tarot deck for you. So one of the first things that I think you should really consider is, do you have a connection? Do you have literal chemistry when you look at the art of that deck? Why does that matter? Well, if you have chemistry, if you have a connection, you're going to want to work with that deck more frequently. If you don't care for the art, then you're not. So this is a version of the Rider-Waite-Smith, the iconic Rider-Waite-Smith, and this was a gift from a friend of mine. It has a patina. There were original watercolor paintings if you've never seen the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. This is something I will love forever because it was a gift, but it's not something I'm going to work with quite frequently, and we're going to go into some of the reasons why. First, no chemistry, no connection. I just don't feel like that particular set of art really speaks to me. It is a product of the time that it was released, which was 1909, and as a professional illustrator, it's very important to me that I have a passionate reaction to my tarot cards. That's what makes me want to work with them, and I don't have a passionate reaction to that. No. So this isn't something I would choose for myself. Personally, I love it because someone got it for me, but I'm never going to work with it that much. Imagery. Imagery is a big part of having chemistry or connection. Here we go. So here is one of the, this is from the box, but this is one of the watercolor paintings that Pamela Smith did. And I don't really so much care for it. So for me, if you don't have a connection to that imagery, if you don't feel that chemistry and the images kind of turn you off, why would you possibly want to work with it? So that's a no-go. If you don't like the images, don't get it. The next thing you should consider is whether you want a traditional tarot deck or you want an oracle. An oracle is an independently illustrated deck that generally has original art and original meanings, and quite frequently is labeled in English if it's in the United States, and the word is going to be what the card means. So if it's labeled grief, then that's what it means. On the other hand, I think that there is a lot of flow in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. If you pull the 10 of Swords, which can represent grief, among other things, you might get that from the imagery, or you might not. The benefit to going with a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck is there's tons of information, lots of videos, lots of books. The oracles, if it's an independent oracle, there's only going to be the information by the author and illustrator. There isn't going to be any deep body of knowledge that you can deep dive into later on, so that might matter to you. Tying into that subject, your experience. Are you very experienced? If you're extremely experienced, you might have a preference to a particular deck over another deck. So for example, I'm 50 years old. I know, right? 50. Who knew I would live this long? But I am. I'm 50. And I started doing tarot when I was probably like 8 or 9. I honestly, I wish I could remember. I don't remember the exact year. But using Rider-Waite-Smith was the first deck that I got. It was the first deck that I worked with. It's the deck that I based my independent deck on, the Nicole Dominique Johnson Tarot deck. And link in the description if you happen to want to see that. I have experience with this deck, so that's the wheelhouse that I am comfortable in. I don't necessarily use the Tarot of Marseille. I don't use the Book of Thoth. Those are two other very popular systems of tarot. Obviously, the Tarot of Marseille is going to be more popular in Europe and specifically France. The Thoth is very popular in both England and the United States. But if you have lots of experience and you want to stay within your wheelhouse, then that might mean something specific in terms of the deck you pick. On the other hand, if you're brand new, you might not care to have something that has such a huge body of work. You might want something much more straightforward, simpler, if you will, to learn. And as you're learning, because you're new, you're not burdened by having a lot of interpretation of any specific card like you do with the Rider-Waite-Smith. If you have a deck that you can interpret based on the Rider-Waite imagery and your experience, that might be easy. If you're learning, I think you should pick one that you have chemistry with. Quality. Quality is related to what you want in terms of the actual production value of the card. This is a cheaply produced deck. It's essentially very thin cardstock, and it's not going to take a lot of shuffling before it becomes permanently creased. The edges start to fray because it's very, very low quality. If you want something that's higher quality, you're going to be looking for German black core. And that is a thick type of art paper that produces very bright colors because it is black. And because it is thick, it has longevity. But there are limits to how thick you want cards. If you want a little bit of flex to your shuffle, if the flex is not something you utilize in your shuffle, then again, that may not matter. But other types of quality finishes may be things like ultraviolet fade resistant. It might be scratch proof. It might be splash proof. You might have a poker card casino finish on it, which is meant for heavy wear and tear. You might want decks that have special edging, and all those go into the quality of the deck. So for example, some decks on the outside, rather than just the paper color, will be trimmed in a metallic or a holographic or a matte color. You might want a deck that has a box, or you might want a deck that has, a bag, and all those are going to tie into the quality of the cards and of course the cost. Intended use is an important point to think about. If you are intending to use the cards for your own purposes, meaning your own personal readings, that might have a different set of circumstances than if you are a professional tarot card reader. If you are a professional, you might want a certain format based on the way you conduct your readings. If you do remote readings, having a small deck might not be good for you because you're going to be holding those cards up for the remote viewer to look at. If you do parties, you might want a larger deck so that lots of people can see. They're more dramatic, they're more flashy. On the other hand, if it's just personal use, space might be an issue, and having a card that is much larger than the standard 70 millimeters by 120 millimeters might be bad for you because it needs more space. Of course, I've touched on this before. You know what I'm going to say. I know you know. Size matters. Size matters when it comes to shuffling specifically, but also laying out your tarot card reading. Shuffling is how easy those cards are going to be manipulated in your hand. And while you can learn to use any deck with enough practice, there are going to be sizes that are more compatible with your specific hand size. If you have extremely small hands, you might not be comfortable with very, very large cards, jumbo format cards. On the other hand, if you have very large hands, small micro decks might be a no-go for you. And even a standard deck might not be big enough depending on the size of your hand. So size definitely matters in terms of your comfort level of shuffling that deck. Guidebook. Believe it or not every tarot deck in the world comes with a guidebook. So if having a guidebook matters to you because you are referring to that guidebook to get meaning and insight into your tarot readings, having one is incredibly important. On the other hand, if you are either an intuitive reader that has enough basis in the symbolism of the Rider-Waite Smith or whichever system of tarot you're using, having a book might not matter to you at all. Also, the way the book is produced might matter. Do you need color illustrations? Well, a lot of times when you are getting a tarot card deck, you're going to get the little white booklet, the LWB, and that might be enough or not enough, depending on what it says. This one is not illustrated other than the Empress on the cover. And so if you're looking for illustrations, this might not be good enough for you. You might need to buy a separate additional book. On the other hand, some decks, particularly independently produced decks, tend to put a little more effort into their books, in my experience anyway. And so they have a little bit more to offer a lot of times than the LWB that you might get in a more introductory deck. Card edition. Card edition comes into play if you're a collector. Having a first edition card edition is going to be more valuable in the long term than a fifth printing of a deck, because generally speaking, it's a lot like books. The sooner you get to number one, the more valuable it is. So a first edition is going to be more valuable than a second or a third, and that might come into play. On the other hand, if you're not a collector or you don't intend to trade or sell your cards, having a specific edition might not matter whatsoever to you. So just bear in mind that it is a factor that you might want to think about if you are a collector. And accessories. Some decks come with accessories, and to a certain degree, you might say that the little white book is an accessory. It is something in addition to the cards. Other accessories, I've seen them sold with talismans. I've seen them sold with crystals. I've seen them sold with tarot card bags. They're just anything under the sun. There might be a tarot reading mat or an altar mat that is included in it. And that may come into play both in the cost and in the usefulness to you personally. So if you want something that has a specific accessory, that might mean you give up something else if that accessory matters to you. On the other hand, you might just want the basic deck with the book and you're going to accessorize on your own. But it's just something to think about. I hope you found this useful. This will be one of many videos, and if you would like to visit my store, it is grayrosegames.com. You can see the deck that I personally produced there, and there is additional information available to you regarding reading tarot cards. I want to thank you so much for joining me. It's so kind for you to give me your time and attention, and I would very much appreciate it. It, in fact, would mean the world to me if you would go ahead and like, comment, share, subscribe, and smash that bell for notifications so that you're made aware every time I release a new video. Have an absolutely beautiful day.